Many journeys begin in Scotland. Inspired by our pioneering spirit, our commitment to equality, and our constant strive in the pursuit for better. This is where minds meet. And the journey to change begins. When we bring scientists together, we find cures. When we bring world leaders together, we fight the climate crisis. When we bring big thinkers together, they arrive at the answer. And now, it's your turn. Our stages are set. Platforms for big ideas and new approaches. Our speakers amplify the opinions of brilliant minds. Our spotlights focus on the world's most pressing issues. Together, we have the power to change the world. And this is the place to make it happen. When the time is right, start the journey to change in Scotland.
Well, a very good morning, everyone, and a warm welcome to all those in the room who've managed to make it to Glasgow, and especially to all those online who couldn't join us today. We are a global industry, and this event is no different, with friends and colleagues joining us from across the UK, Europe, Africa, and the Americas online. So welcome. The eyes of the world are on COP26 and Glasgow as the most important event of our generation and future generations gets underway to save our planet. COP26 is a business event, one that is bringing world leaders together to see eye to eye to hopefully solve the climate crisis. The global pandemic that is COVID drove us into our homes. It forced us online. But the last 18 months have shown that problems cannot be solved on screen. We, as human beings, need to interact. We need to communicate not just through emojis, but through body language. Only one industry can do that: business events. The global pandemic also laid bare the frighteningly large variety of other pandemics the world faces: poverty, poor access to education, lack of access to quality healthcare, lack of resources for all nations to play their part in fighting the climate crisis, and a severe lack of equality for all across the world. Our industry, business events, are and continue to be a critical tool for the world to combat inequality and make people's lives better. By bringing world leaders, pioneering scientists, education experts, medical innovators, and future generations of entrepreneurs together, we amplify the voices of those less heard. We give a platform to global issues. We, as a society, find solutions. In Scotland, we use business events to spotlight our areas of expertise, such as renewable energy, animal health and sustainable food production, medical sciences, or financial services equality. Scotland has been and will continue to be a good global citizen, bringing events to our country to share knowledge, to collaborate. Sustainability is not a competition. We must all work together to make our industry a world-leading sector in protecting our natural capital and ensuring we put people and planet first. So once again, ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to this event. Visit Scotland looked back over the last 18 months with everything I've just said about tackling equality, with tackling climate change, on how we approach the business event sector. And we did that by asking our panel of experts, our thousands of clients across the world. And they came back with some really hard-hitting information. They are now looking for destinations that address major international issues like climate change. They look for destinations that are inclusive to all races, faiths, genders, and sexualities. They look for destinations with social mobility, social inclusion, education, and fairness of opportunity. And they look for a destination that is committed to social transformation, how our events engage with local communities. All of these align with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. These 17 goals were created in 2015 to allow the world to come together to combat the climate crisis, such as no poverty, no inequalities, good health and well-being, quality education, peace and justice, and one thing our industry excels at is partnership. All of these United Nations Sustainable Development Goals must work in partnership together. We have to solve the poverty crisis, the equality crisis, the education and universal healthcare in order to tackle climate change. And we in Scotland and around the world believe that business events are a critical tool for doing just that. These United Nations goals can be summarised in 5 different categories of people, prosperity, peace, partnership and planet. And events can feed into each and every one of them. You might be aware of corporate social responsibility. That is an initiative that many organisations have around the world, and they have done for years. As an industry, we have not always taken advantage of this, and we need to ensure that we're aligning to the corporate social responsibility aims and goals of organisations around the world and help them to achieve them in Scotland. This could be anything such as sustainability, equality, fair work, and young people. Almost every CSR policy aligns to United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And as I said, we absolutely believe that we as an industry can help organisations across the world achieve this and play their part and our part in fighting the climate crisis. When looking to promote a country post-pandemic, we looked at 3 different pillars: a platform for social and economic transformation, a spotlight for tackling global issues, and we want our industry to be a voice for human rights. All of these 3 pillars for promoting Scotland as a good global citizen in turn support the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And that is how we came to Journey to Change. We as a society, we need to change continuously in order to make our planet and our people better. That change is a continuous journey, and we believe that that journey starts right here in Scotland. When we launched Journey to Change back in March of this year, we launched with 6 key messages. That Scotland is changing tomorrow by meeting today. One of those examples was the World Down Syndrome Conference held here in Glasgow in 2018, where initiatives were created in order to allow taxi drivers, hoteliers, retail shops, hotels and venues make sure that those with Down syndrome felt as welcome in our country and in the city of Glasgow as possible. Scotland is exporting climate justice across the world. 90% of our electricity already comes from renewable sources, and Scottish Renewables, one of our innovation centres, is using COP26 to showcase the expertise in marine renewable energy in order to help those people in less developed nations transition to cleaner energy. Scotland is putting human and ecological well-being first. We are a founding, well, not we, Scotland is a founding member of the Wellbeing Economy Alliance, which was founded with New Zealand, Iceland and Scotland, now incorporating Wales and Finland. It aims to measure country success not just on GDP, but on how happy its citizens are. It has beliefs that we all need fairness, nurture, participation, connection and dignity in order to transition to well-being. Scotland is a platform for global change. I don't think I need to go into too much detail with that one, given that COP26 is happening right here and right now. We are a driving force for change, and that starts in Scotland. The data for children collaboration with UNICEF is using big data to change children's lives around the world. Business events can help with this. Business events can improve with this by being a catalyst for collaboration and international collaboration with our innovation centres and our universities with others around the world. And business events and communities, Connect in Scotland. The A3 Aquaculture, Animal Health and Agritech Conference is taking place next year, an inaugural event for Scotland, and we will hear more about that later on from John. But we are aiming to help communities and industries to promote what they do and the expertise that happens in Scotland to collaborate and play our part on the world stage. This is all about balancing our culture and our messaging about people and planet. We have for years promoted the fantastic rich history and culture of Scotland. And now we're balancing that with showcasing the incredible innovation that takes place for social transformation. One thing we've realised is that you can't please everyone. We can only do what is right. By aligning with the Scottish Government's policies and by aligning with United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, we hope we are doing what is right for our industry, for the sustainability of our industry, and for the planet. There is no denying that our planet needs us. It needs us individually, it needs us as a sector to collaborate and to unite, to solve the challenges and play our small part in doing so from now and for the future. We need venue sustainability strategies, destination community engagement, sustainable food policies, sustainable delegate travel options, social enterprise partnership, and corporate social responsibility alignment. Now, these cheeky chappies are my niece Mirren, who is 5, and my godson Sam, who is 10. When I first came into this job, or this industry, it was for the promotion of Scotland. It was to tell people how incredible our nation is with our kilts, our bagpipes, our whiskey. Over the last few years, it's no longer just about that. It is about ensuring that my godson and my niece have exactly the same opportunities, if not better, than what I had. And I believe our industry plays a small part in doing so. David Attenborough yesterday said that this is no longer about future generations. This is about the generation that is already here and making sure our planet is safe for them. And as I've reiterated time and time again, you may be sick of hearing me say it, but business events have a role to play. We are responsible for our actions. We are even more responsible for our inactions. So we have to step up, and we are stepping up, and we continue to step up to save the planet. And that is why the journey to change begins in Scotland. That is enough of me. And I'm more than happy, and I'm absolutely delighted they were joined today by John Makenzie, Chief Executive Officer of the Roslin Innovation Centre, Mickael Paris, Marketing Director for FinTech Scotland, to tell us more about their work and their connection to the business events sector. So please welcome John, Mickael, and Fiona McKinnon, our moderator for this session.
Rory, thank you very much for introducing us, and thanks to John and Mickael for joining me today and for taking your masks off. If I'd kept mine, I'd have probably forgotten. So a very warm welcome again to everybody who's joined us today. It is so good to see you in person. So thanks for those who made it here. To everybody watching online, hello, and glad you're with us as well. It feels quite almost overwhelming to be here in Glasgow today, knowing what's happening just down the road, how important it is, how this is a moment in history for us all that we probably won't realise till we're looking back on it later. So I'm so delighted to be joined by both John and Mickael today, and how appropriate that, given this is arguably the most important event happening in the world at the moment, and it's certainly the largest business event that's ever been held in Scotland, that today we're discussing the business events role, the platform for social and economic change. And that platform, as Rory said, that creates positive change in our world. But let's get going. And I'm going to start by asking both of you, Mickael, I'm going to start with you first. If you can share with us a bit more about your organisation. Who is FinTech Scotland?
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for attending. FinTech Scotland was launched in January 2018, so we're almost 4 years old. We'll have a big party to celebrate, I'm sure, inviting you.
Thank you, I'll be there.
And we were launched really to create financial innovation, to create more inclusion and collaboration within society. Scotland has always been, as Rory said, an innovative country. It's a Scot who invented the Bank of England. Very few people know that. But we also invented the PIN number, life insurance, and many more financial innovation. So knowing that, it was very important for us that when this word fintech came about, Scotland seized the opportunity. And it wasn't just London. We got investment and economic growth. We work very well with London, actually. We're lucky to have them just an hour away. It's a great financial center, but we've got so many things to offer to financial innovation companies, SMEs, or large financial institutions indeed. So that's why we were launched, to facilitate that collaboration within the ecosystem through a collaboration between academia, private sector, and public sector.
Okay, fantastic. And I know there's only a few of you, but you do incredible work.
Thank you.
So that helps you to become quite agile because you can do what you want, you deal with everybody.
Absolutely.
And that collaboration is kind of what's made you grow hugely over the last 4 years. When we first met you, I think 4 years ago, you were just starting out. But now what you're doing and all of the companies involved and the ecosystem in Scotland for fintech has just grown. Did it exceed your expectations, or is it on track?
I never had any doubt that we would succeed in terms of growing the community. We've got the innovators, we've got great universities. So that wasn't a worry. Trying to find a gel that brings everything together was the hard piece. But in fact, it was made easy from the beginning, from the outset, with the First Minister really chairing that FISAB meeting, the Financial Service Advisory Board, and coming up with the idea of FinTech Scotland, really. So from the top, it then trickled down and mobilized all the forces behind the project, really.
Okay, fantastic.
Thank you.
So for all of us who didn't know what fintech was, we do now. And John, over to you. Please tell us more about the Roslin Innovation Centre. I know you're a very big campus. You have a lot there. Tell us about it.
Thanks, Fiona, and thanks Visit Scotland for inviting me. First of all, it's great actually to be here in person, like everybody else. Not just that, but the nerves and the adrenaline rush. Kind of lost that last couple of years. So it's good to be back. Roslin Innovation Centre, kind of new kid in town, just like Mickael's. We've been open since August 2017, so 4.5 years and counting. And we're the business gateway into the University of Edinburgh's Easterbush campus, which is just outside of Edinburgh. We're part of the College of Medicine and Veterinary Medicine. And we also host the Roslin Institute, home of Dolly the sheep, well known to us all around the world. Taxi drivers in Australia, they'll talk about Dolly. So it's a great brand and reputation. That was over 20 years ago. And we need to find the next Dolly, but we'll not do that in isolation. We'll do that in collaboration with other parties. So the Roslin Innovation Centre is a space and place, this gateway, that you can actually locate businesses. You can be local, you can be international, you can be small, you can be big, you can be new, you can be well established, as long as you're in our AAA, and that's animal health, agri-tech and aquaculture. And if you're predisposed to collaborate with any of the stakeholders, that Roslin Institute, Scottish Rural College have got a base there, and the Royal Dick Vet School. If you're predisposed to collaborate, then you're very welcome to be there. And we've got a nice community engagement and trying to build an ecosystem, building on what already is the highest concentration of animal-related expertise in all of Europe. So the investment the university and co-founders are put into new buildings and a sort of critical mass on site. It's just a great place to be. And of course, innovation, collaboration at the heart of that. So 31 tenants after 4.5 years and counting, still 85% occupied, which is an optimal target. You don't want to be full because there's no room at the end and room to grow. So it's a good day job and it's a great place, great campus to be.
Fantastic. And what a mix where you've got universities with industry, startups. I know some of them will come out of the universities and come in and then they've got a place to go. and you've got your industry and all of your public bodies involved as well. So again, a great ecosystem. And to say that it's the biggest area in Europe, that's quite a coup. So that's incredible. That
was a starting point, and now we've gone on. There's a 25-year sort of plan. We're midway through that. Okay. And yes, this interface is this special place between business and academia, this triple helix that includes government agencies to boot. So when you get that mix of expertise, this cross-fertilization of ideas come out, and these random collisions happen. You create the ecosystem, the physical infrastructure, not least there's a value proposition for being on campus. And then you can step back a little bit and let people go about their daily business and bump into each other, talk about the weather, talk about COVID, but talk about science as well. And that begets new product services that will go a long way to address some of the challenges we've got.
So it's a bit like an event. It's that serendipity of not knowing who you're going to bump into. And that, for me, from the world of events, has always been where the magic happens, where the things happen, the connections take place.
It's been such a missing piece this last 2 years. We've all suffered for that. And getting back out again today in COP26 shows we can do that sort of thing again and build confidence that we get back to that networking piece. Because networking is not working.
That's a very good way of putting it. I like that. So we all know, and the purpose for being here today and in Glasgow, is that the most significant event of our generation, no matter how old you are, I'm not sorry, Neil, I wasn't looking at you for that reason. That's me sacked after today. But to both of you, what does COP26 mean to your organisations? And what I mean by that is, what do you hope to see after COP26? And has COP26 influenced any new policies or new initiatives within your own organisations? Mickael, I'm looking at you, so I'm going to start with you.
What I'm hoping to see is, beyond all the political debates we'll have in the next couple of weeks, is innovation from the private sector. I firmly believe that every time there's a burning platform, innovation comes out of it. If you look at 2008 and the financial crash, we got cryptocurrency. You look at COVID, in a year, companies from all around the world developed a vaccine in under a year, I think, which is pretty formidable. I have no doubt when we finally realize that we are at 1 minute to midnight, hopefully before that, people will come together and innovate. There is the wealth, there is the will, and certainly we have the brain in Scotland to do that. We can be leading, I think, from Scotland change. And that's what I'm hoping to see. There's a tendency for government to work against large corporates. I'd like to see more collaboration in that respect and stopping that dichotomy between the wealth and with the people. Actually, let's have the two come together and innovate together.
Which does need to happen if the change is made. Yeah, I liked your analogy of the fire. That's actually very powerful. After the fire comes the innovation.
Absolutely.
Let's hope it does. Yeah. And over to yourself, John.
Yeah, well, we've all got sort of sector-specific priorities and objectives, and COP26 is certainly putting it in people's hearts and minds now, and we're talking about it like never before. So it's good to sort of piggyback on that, and we need to build that momentum and building the confidence that we're back out and engaging again. Specifically in our sectors, animal health, agritech, aquaculture. And in particular, One Health, which is, it's always been out there, but, that's animals, humans, and the planet, So we all converge together there. So, getting that public discourse to understand that there's new ways and means of doing things. And this big challenge of the extra 2 billion on the planet by 2050, we need to be fed. There's growing middle classes, there's developing countries, there's addressing poverty. There's all these sort of big challenges, so that we can sort of look towards that, and we need to be innovating here and now and collaborating here and now. As I said before, we're not going to do things in isolation, and we've got to do it faster and accelerate that sort of developments. So I think, an event such as this, I think it gives the urgency that's needed. We've seen how we've responded to COVID-19, so we can, respond quickly and collaboratively and come up with solutions that have helped enormously. And the vaccination is case in point. We wouldn't all be here today, masks apart, if it wasn't for the double vaccinations. Now, not every country is able to sort of participate in that to the scale that UK and Scotland have. But I think, COP26 is really sending a strong message. And I think Scotland is playing its part there. We're hosting, yes, but we're leading as well. We're a small country, 5 million. There's a specific personalities, our DNA about us. We're good innovators. We're great collaborators. Not so good in terms of commercialisation. We can improve on that. But you know what? I think we can lead in so many other ways. I think Rory mentioned it's GDP, yes, but it's GDP plus. It's all other measures that we can look at. It's profit with purpose, impact. And I like to think, business for good is good for business. So, I think getting that out, I'm seeing that more and more with our startups and our young entrepreneurs coming through. They actually want to do more for the planet through their business. So they're driven, highly motivated that way. So I think COP26 really puts that firmly in the agenda, and we really should follow that lead.
And I like what you said about we can do a vaccine in a year. There's a lot of other things we could also be doing to put our minds to it. But we've got the technology, we've got the know-how, it's the pulling everything together. So from the mighty AAA, as I would like to call it, which is your mix of agri-tech, aquaculture and animal health, do they all work together pretty well at the moment, or do you see what's coming from COP26 being able to help accelerate how everybody works together, or do you think that would just be a natural progression?
I think it'll be a natural convergence, and I think we're coming out of the silos. We can't just work in our separate sectors. Finance and agri-tech have got, say, commonality there, and we can find ways and means. It's traceability, provenance of food, financial transactions, supply chains that are affected. So and transactions, and how do we get more to source farmers? How do they benefit more? And there's lots of intermediaries there, and can we cut out middlemen and women in some ways? So I think there's a natural convergence, but we need to recognise, animal health, agri-tech and aquaculture, they are separate sectors, different focuses, but we can learn a lot from each other. And the One Health is a good example. There's lots of work in animals that can translate into humans. And of course, that dreaded COVID, that was a zoonotic disease, which is a disease that passes between animals and humans. So, I think it's a natural way forward, but we have to facilitate that. And days like today and talking about it and bringing people out and just being open-minded, I think we'll find ways and means of coming together and coming up with new solutions.
Thank you.
If I can add to that, I think it was a perfect example to bring agri-tech, fintech, and also space tech together. We've got some great innovation happening in Scotland with satellite imagery being used to look at crops, quality of crops, and being able to lend money to farmers when you need that the most, and fight climate change and look at local economy, which is fantastic. And it's like you said, it's not working in silos. It's working together across sector, and that's what we're trying to do more and more. So I'm very happy to meet you today, and I'm sure we'll have further chat afterwards. And also to add that to your point about good capital, I'm not sure if a lot of people will know in the room, but the biggest impact you can have on climate change is through your investment. So, you can recycle, you can drive electric, but the impact you're going to have on the overall story is minimal. If tonight you go home and you look at where your pension is invested or your stocks and shares are invested, we're speaking about trillion and trillion of money. If everyone was to invest in ESG funds, we could change the story very, very, very quickly, a lot faster than by just recycling plastic.
That is something I've certainly never thought of. A good thought.
That's the biggest engine for change.
Okay, fantastic. That's why we have these sessions. And on that note, what does sustainability and social sustainability mean for you? And I think you partly just touched on that. What would it mean for you, Mickael?
I think sustainability, I'm more interested in social sustainability, which is about bringing people on the journey. Yeah. I'm scared that the measures that are being looked at the minute are very punitive.
Okay.
Rising taxes for fuel. There's talks about rising taxes on meat products. Who's going to be impacted? The many. People who already struggle to buy fuel, already struggle to buy meat. Yeah. Those people who can, and I'm not targeting anyone, it's not about rich versus poor, but people who can drive SUVs and car that pollutes a bit more won't be impacted by a rising tax on fuel, I'm sorry to say. But people who have to use their car to commute every day to work or to take their kids to school, they will suffer even more. I'd like policies, social, sustainable policies that can help the many come on the journey and actually understand what the strategy is and the role they have to play to make a change.
Be a part of it.
Yes, we can have debates about what sustainability means. And certainly in the financial sector, we do. There's no, for example, there's no standards for what ESG funds mean. An ESG company, there's no standards for reporting ESG. Okay. So we can debate that all day. At the end of the day, it's about the people. So how do we bring people on the journey? How do we give them the tools, the data, so they understand what actually makes a difference? Yeah. And also not punishing them for doing the things they have to do to live.
Yeah. Very well put.
Thank you.
John, what about you? Got anything to add to that?
Yeah, well, it's good to hear. I mean, I think sustainability is the absolute key word, you know, and I think we all go away after COP26 and we're talking sustainability in all things, in all conversations, because it's inclusive, it's long lasting. If we look at economic impact, business tourism, you know, which is great, you know, getting people here to Scotland, spending power, staying hospitality, but you know, you have to sustain it. You can't have too many too often. And I think you know, the pandemic has certainly demonstrated that we might have been overheating a little bit. And then, okay, planes out the skies, and all of a sudden things are sort of calm. But we need to get back into sort of a better balance, and that sustainability piece is important. That it's we look at all the factors in the equation, and the GDP plus is important to me. Economic impact, it has to be sustainable economic impact. It's just not about the money, the price. It's a cost along the way, and the qualitative as well as the sort of quantitative factors that are in there. For me, it's food and alternative proteins and cellular meat, cultured meat. I want to see these coming through as new technologies that can be accelerated. We can see we can do that. But that will go towards the sustainability of the planet, of people, because, you know, centuries ahead, we want to be thinking beyond 2070. You know, it's
the long term.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. That brings us very neatly on to the next question, which is, both of your organisations are involved with face-to-face events, or have not been for the last couple of years. Why is it important for you to bring your experts together face-to-face? Now, you have slightly different takes on this. Mickael, you have a festival every year, which for the last 2 years has been a mix of hybrid, online, and some face-to-face, more this year than last. John, your inaugural event should have happened last year in 2020 and is now taking place in April of next year, A3. So you're coming from a different standpoint. So I'm going to start with actually John first. What is it about? I know you made the decision to not hold the event online, to make it face-to-face and move it to next year. So what was behind that decision?
Well, COVID got in everybody's way, didn't it? And you know, the germ of our conference, you know, we came about with Visit Scotland, not least, you know, sort of willing to sort of back us, and it really was just a couple of us sort of thinking we can do a similar event that we've both been to in different occasions in Canada, Prince Edward Island. And if they can do it there, we can do it here in Scotland, bring the sort of personality of Scotland, sort of the intimate nature, the Scottishness, the whiskey, the salmon, the kilts, the bagpipes, the hospitality, and build lasting relationships that, you know, that begats, you know, collaboration, innovation. And so it was important that we have this in-person event. Of course, everybody was moving to sort of virtual. the end of the day, you're still sitting at home in your bedroom in front of your computer, and you're not really getting out and about. You're reaching, across the world, and you're still being able to communicate quite efficiently. But for us, it was important, not even a hybrid. You need to be here. You need to come to Edinburgh in Scotland. It's a not-for-profit endeavour, and if it's a success, we're going to look to sort of continue it. But you need to come here and be part of it. And there's a fear of missing out then, therefore. And from that perspective, it was so important that it was physical. So we quite quickly discounted any notion of a virtual, or indeed here and now a hybrid. It will be in April. I believe we can get 26,000 to Glasgow. We can certainly get 330 people to Edinburgh. So get your tickets in first, or avoid disappointment, is what I'm saying.
Excellent plug. Well done. It'll be a fantastic event. And it's being held outside Edinburgh, but it's also, you're covering other parts of Scotland. So
it's absolutely
showing off Scotland's amazing work in the field right across the country, which is great. Absolutely.
It's a pan-Scotland thing. We've got many international assets, and we're showcasing to ourselves, because we don't always appreciate, not least, as well as the rest of the world. And Scotland is a small enough and big enough place that we can do that. We tend to get a bit parochial sometimes. So it's trying to sort of cut through that and bring us together as one. So bring it on. Just looking forward to the hospitality in particular.
And Mickael, your series of events is quite different with your festival, and I know you've adapted, and you've done sort of online for some of the events and face to face for others. So how's it been for you on that front? How have you found it over there? Because the first couple of years were all face to face, and then you've adapted, and then 2022 is probably still a question mark. How's it been for you on that front? Why is face-to-face important?
I think it's been enlightening, if I'm honest. So the festival, for those who don't know, probably the majority of you, if you're not interested in fintech, about 70 events across 4 weeks, all across Scotland. And 2 years ago, that meant a lot of time on train, going to Aberdeen, to Stirling, to Edinburgh, to Glasgow, and back and forth and back and forth. Not very sustainable, I'm afraid to say. Sometimes I had to use the car. And the reality of the matter is not all events really justified physical presence. You don't really need to be in the same room to hear about the impact of R&D tax credit on innovation for 45 minutes. That can be done online.
Okay.
So this year we had over 60 events across the 4 weeks. The opening event was in-person hybrid as well. And the closing event was in-person hybrid. All the other ones were online. So in reality, it's about doing it better, because we spend a lot of time and effort organizing those two in-person events. And we had some amazing speakers. And my gosh, it was very successful. We got ministers from UK government, Scottish government, the FinTech National Network, so all the other FinTech hubs from the UK met in Glasgow for the first time in 2 years, and the feedback was excellent. The opening event, organized by Digital Dynamic Earth, was great, and people really raved about being together again. And that made a big difference. The other thing is your reach by putting events either in a hybrid format or virtual format is greater. We had virtual delegations from Australia, Hong Kong, New Zealand, the US, Canada, the Nordics, people who even before COVID wouldn't have come to Scotland. And now we were able to talk to the world. So there's pros and cons. But what I would say is in the future, I don't think we'll go back to 70 events in person. We'll probably look at, what are the events that justify bringing people, having people travel to Scotland, trying to be a bit more sustainable, and working with companies like yourself to help us. How do we do a sustainable conference? How do we do a sustainable festival? What's the best practice here?
Okay.
Can I just add, Fiona, on the face-to-face? You create the conditions, you create the events, they can sustainable. We mentioned serendipity earlier. I think that's what you can't predict, is the random collisions that can happen, the water cooler moment in the office, or at a venue, it's just, over lunch, you talk about the weather, and all of a sudden you have a connection, you talk about science, and then I do this, you do that. Okay, well, let's collaborate. So I think that random collision is a big component, a missing piece in this past 2 years.
But I think what we all know is what it's coming down to is it depends on the topic, depends on the sector, it depends where people are coming from. And I think in the future it will be what individuals want to do. And if they have the choice, they can still tap into what you're talking about and they can have the accessibility of that event. And it's different reasons for different events, which I think you've both demonstrated perfectly this morning. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
So my final question, you'll be glad to hear, and it's a question really for us to you. So how can the business events community support the vision of your organisations? John, I'm going to go to you first.
Well, you can continue to sponsor us, so that's good. That's a great start. But no, I think the sustainable event, the best practice, the guidance. We've certainly been looking to Visit Scotland in terms of the messaging, as to what we can do and when and how better. So I think that's an absolutely important kind of piece. So and just continuing to plug Scotland as you do, I think we can quite quickly fall in line with the razzmatazz and the professional presentations that you guys can put on. It just makes us look a bit better for it. We'll do our own inimitable bit. And it's just reflecting that personality of Scotland. It is different, it is better. Mickael's from France, but he's been here 16 years. He's an adopted Scot. So, once you're here, we don't let you leave.
That's true. We took the chains off just for today. But thank you. We'll slip you a tenner later. So I love the razzmatazz. That's such a good word and describes us all beautifully. But we all work together, so it's our pleasure to promote your event. And in fact, both organisations have been part of our journey to change. You provided articles, so we're equally, it's equally our job to promote what you're doing as best we can to our own markets, so that people know the amazing work you're doing. Mickael, last word to you.
My ask to you would be, tell us where to go, what innovations are of interest. I have no doubt that we've seen some change in the tourism industry and the business event industry. Actually felt sorry for Rory not being able to travel and drink so much champagne during 18 months.
Don't feel too sorry for him. He's fine.
But joke aside, there's going to be a lot of innovation coming, hopefully, post COP26. Things that we probably laugh at just now, the same way we laughed at people telling us 30 years ago that we'd have internet in our pockets. People starting to speak about virtual reality, Facebook investing billions and billions and billions in their virtual reality platform. Right now, we're laughing at it. Help us understand what are the possibilities offered by those new technologies, how to access them and use them in the best way. That would be my ask to you.
Okay, noted. Sure, Rory's written that down. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Fiona, I will give you the final word.
Go on then.
But again, credit to yourselves for putting on events such as this and bringing myself and Mickael together for the first time. We're going to go away and have a conversation, and right away I can identify, for instance, carbon credits. How do we monetize and incentivize carbon credits? So in businesses, that it says profit with purpose, yes, as a bottom line, but can we actually have some sort of ways of farmers benefiting of the work that some of the innovations and the business they do? Can we actually monetize that in a way and transact that gives us benefit and value and credibility in some shape or form? So I'm sure we'll have a conversation that may lead to a future project funding of some shape or form. So, you've served a purpose in the very least bringing us together, and over that coffee, we'll have that chat.
My pleasure. and it's a slight aside, just on touching on what you've both said. We have a podcast series out at the moment for COP26, which I hope some of you have listened to. If not, please do. The people who've interviewed are fantastic. But one of the ones that really struck a chord with me is actually a local Glasgow company called Dear Green Coffee. And I'm sure their coffee's fabulous. I'm actually going to buy some today while I'm here. But what they were doing when everything shut down and their cafes weren't opening, who they supplied to had disappeared, they just flipped into eco-commerce. And they were able to, by using satellites, just what you were saying earlier, to be able to look at the small coffee providers and be able to pay them through cryptocurrency slightly over my head, but it was amazing. It blew my mind a little bit. So they kept the small coffee growers going. They kept the coffee coming into Glasgow. They kept their business running. Amazing. Anyway, a small aside, I'm really bad for that. But it just sparked from what you both said to me that, please listen to that episode. It's out under Nature. It's very interesting. Thank you both very much for both your insights, for being here today with us, and for sharing about your own organisations, which we are huge fans of. We are going to hand over to our in-person audience today to see if you have any questions. If you haven't, I've got loads, and you maybe don't want to hear those. So if anybody has any questions, now is the time. Rory.
Hi, thank you very much. That was absolutely fantastic. John, the 8th week is the inaugural conference for Scotland, and how the Fintech Festival has created events throughout Scotland to create that festival and also encourage more. What's the ambition for both of those events going into the future, and how does that reflect onto your organisation's ambitions?
Who do you want to answer first?
Oh, anyone.
If I maybe take that one first. Looking at next year, if hopefully this crisis is behind us, we'll be looking at probably even more events enabled by the virtual platforms that we now have at our disposal, but better in-person events, bigger in-person events, and hopefully greener in-person events, again with your help, telling us what to do and what not to do, and try to reach out to a global audience.
Okay, great. Anything to add, John?
I would really want preempting success that we want to run another event, and it becomes, if not an annual, sort of every 2 years, and I think that's fair, that's sustainable, not least, and it's kinder for all the travel, etc. So, bringing people together, I imagine they'll want to come back, and then we'll reach out to some more, and we can even grow the conference. Although I think it is a small, personal, sort of humble, authentic event that we're trying to sort of build here, and and sponsorship has been phenomenal already. We really have some big hitters already signed up, not least Zoetis and our platinum sponsor. So preempting success. The surplus will be reinvested into the conference, and that's the beauty. It's a not-for-profit endeavour. We're underwriting and hosting it at the University of Edinburgh, but any surplus will sustain going forward, and we can spoil the delegates even more when they come, because we've got campus tours pre and post the event that takes us all the way to Inverness and Oban, Stirling, Dundee, as well as Edinburgh and East Bush campus. So, it is this, Scotland in the round thing. Future events and more opportunities to talk about them.
Okay. You happy with that, Rory?
Yes, absolutely.
Neil, you're queuing up for a question. What's your question?
Yes, I have a quick question about tone of voice. I think some of the conversations we see in the media this week, but also, for example, a couple of months ago, maybe a month ago, there's a discussion about peat, the peat and Islay used for the famous whiskies. And there's very much a government agency saying, well, you've got to stop using the peat for this because we need to preserve the peat. But I think the massive international drinks company pointed out that it's only a tiny, tiny fraction of the peat in that area is used for the whiskey. Most of it is exported for other uses, that both our speakers will know. But it just made me think, why does it have to be that sort of confrontation? We say one thing, somebody else comes back and points out something very pertinent, but also fundamental to the whole debate. Are they using up all the peat or not? So what's the panel's view on the whole tone of voice about this wider issue? Because I think that's a critical point that we're facing.
I think it's an important debate to have, and it has to be based on fact and data. We have to assess and do the calculations. We can't not continue in some ways and means, and there's a whole industry in Scotland around whiskey, and if you like your smoky whiskey, then peat is fundamental to that. So I don't think there can be any suggestion that would not continue. But equally, you can look at it, and there could be alternative ways and means of going about it, innovating in a way that it reduces the impact it has on the climate, or building in some sort of carbon credit offset. For using peat, okay, there's a contribution elsewhere in the rainforest in Brazil or something that is measured and it's fair and it's a balance because you cannot undermine local industries and a major export for Scotland that is whisky, especially the smoky flavoured. Agriculture, for instance, it does get a bad name in terms of livestock and greenhouse gases, CO2, but methane in particular from cows. And agriculture uses 70% of the world's wastewater. So, there's bad press that needs to be addressed. You can't ignore it, but I think you can mitigate it and you can address it and do your bit and to compensate or account for that in some ways or means. But we can't not have the discussion. We can't ignore it, and we just have to find a common optimization for everybody. But there's it's not beyond human wit to come up with sensible ways and means.
Okay.
Yeah, go for it. I'm just thinking it would take another conference to speak about this, because I totally agree with you. It's beyond climate. It seems to me that we're moving towards a society where it's black and white, there's no grey. In every debate, you're pro-vax or anti-vax, you're pro-climate or you're anti-climate. So if you like peat in your whiskey, you're anti-climate. There needs to be a different way of speaking to one another. I don't have the answer. I think that's exacerbated by social media. And I'm not a detractor of social media. Again, the grey area, it's not because you criticize it that you're against it. I think it could be done better. And going back to your point, it's where innovation has a role to play. I think we need new platforms where conversation starts to happen again, because what's happening just now, it's not conversations, it's just people yelling at each other.
Yeah.
And I'm worried about it actually, because I think when I look at new generations, it's only growing as an issue. People don't know how to speak to one another, and maybe speaking in front of computer screens has made that even worse, as opposed to meeting around a pint and having a long debate, and at the end everyone comes out friends, and we don't do that anymore. And I'm a bit worried about it.
Yeah, very interesting. Thank you. I think we are probably out of time. So I'd just like to say a huge thank you to both John and Mickael for joining us this morning, giving up their time. And we hugely appreciate all that they do and their organisations, which we think are pretty awesome. So please join me in giving them a big hand this morning. Thank you. And we'll leave the stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John, Mickael, and for the wonderful moderation. The voice of Scotland of Fiona McKinnon. You may have recognised that voice in the video at the very beginning. Some incredible takeaways there, specifically for our industry. And, GDP plus, which is a phrase I'm now going to incorporate into all my presentations and talks, and how our industry demonstrates what it does beyond economic benefit, the legacy elements that we create, the community engagement we create, and those opportunities for collaboration between different organisations that meet at a business event has to be better told. Just as a little story, when we're talking about the social impact, we went down to a trade show a few weeks ago in the Midlands, I think it was. And instead of taking down whisky tasting or different experiential things, we took down a guide from a company called Invisible Cities, who operate throughout the UK. They also operate some European cities, I believe, and they take people who have been homeless off the street and they train them on how to be tour guides. And we took that, I think he was called Sonny. I believe he was an absolute character in a good way. And he went down to tell his story and to give his background within Edinburgh, and was an absolute hit with the clients and the buyers who were there. And this is all about the small steps and the small changes we as an industry can do by looking to the pro-social companies and the social enterprises that do good in our local and national communities when we are promoting our country. And then finally, the online versus in person. There's been a lot of debate about this over the last 18 months. And certainly, I think the debate will continue. But one thing online has created is an opportunity to reduce inequalities. When creating online content or online broadcasting, we allow delegates from less developed nations to attend medical conferences with vital training, to attend any field or scientific field or educational field where they now have access to that content rather than trying to find the funds to travel. So there are absolutely pros and cons, and there's also a small step of how our industry is looking to reduce inequalities while still meeting face to face. It is now time to introduce our next session, and we are delighted to have join us today Amanda Wrathall, Sales and Marketing Director for the Edinburgh International Conference Centre, Gordon Hodge, Head of Conferencing and Events at the University of Strathclyde here in Glasgow, and our moderator is Neil Brownlee, Head of Business Events for Visit Scotland. Welcome.
Yes, I'm going to do it this way, everyone, so I can see my panelists. So good morning, everyone, and good morning to the online audience. I'm very grateful for the in-person delegates for making the journey to Glasgow. During this day 2 of COP26, we're delighted to be hosting this during the white hot heat of 150 heads of state being just down the road from us here in Glasgow. So welcome, Amanda. Welcome,
Thank
Gordon.
you.
We will come back to the online versus face-to-face debate, but I wanted to start just with a little quote, which you can let me know if you can work out who said it. And I quote, "We get much more results when we meet in person. It's hard to argue against that." And the person who said we get much more results when we meet in person, it's hard to argue against that, wasn't me, it wasn't Fiona, it wasn't Rory or any of my team. It was Greta Thunberg, just 2 months ago, in fact. So we're delighted to have Greta on board as an advocate for face-to-face meetings. But really just to bring it back to the day job after what we've heard from John, Mickael and Fiona, we're going to bring it slightly back to where we were, but after such a torrid 20 months, it is 20 months, everyone says 17 months, 18 months, and it lasts about 2 months longer. It's nearly 2 years, let's just accept it. But, before you tell us about your jobs and where you're from, but after the 20 months we've had, coming out of that into the biggest business event ever to come to Scotland or the UK, and the most significant event anywhere, perhaps this generation. First thoughts? Is it just, gosh?
Gosh, yeah, it's incredibly exciting. I think for the people here, certainly, who work in business events, it's actually put on a global stage what we do. And I mean, this is beyond what most of us would do on a day-to-day basis, but actually people coming together to solve challenges, to talk about innovation, to talk about the future is actually what business events are. And to bring the spotlight back to Scotland and what we can do here with this beast is incredibly exciting. And I think a huge opportunity for us to remind people what can be achieved when people meet.
Yes, it's the ultimate business event.
Yeah.
Gordon, your first thoughts?
I suppose, quite apart from anything else, it's a bit of relief because it has been there. Looming is the only way really to describe it for really more than 2 years now. I'm trying to imagine in the first place what it would have been like if it happened in November last year, and then to have it postponed and then kind of splash back into the puddle again and go, right, okay, how's this going to happen? And then really until quite recently not to understand whether it was going to happen or not. And to have all these kind of organisations coming to Glasgow, coming to our venue and to others and asking for things and asking us to be fortune tellers, basically, it's a real sense of relief for it actually to start happening, because now that it's happening, it gets a momentum of its own, and then we kind of roll with the punches, and we understand what it is that the event needs and what we can achieve and what we can't and all that kind of stuff. So I get a sense of relief, but we were talking about it, and it's different to like when the Olympics and the Commonwealth Games were here, because we're still a wee bit on the outside of it, and obviously the nature of it is going to change as the 2 weeks goes on, which I think is clear even just from yesterday. So it's interesting.
Great. And I've certainly found it quite inspiring, even the first 24 hours or so, but I think we all are struggling to understand that it is finally here and it's happening. Gordon, very quickly remind everyone, for those of us in the audience who don't know, where you're from and about your organisation.
Sure, yeah, I'm from the University of Strathclyde, which is one of the 3 universities in the centre of Glasgow. We're just to the east of the city centre, a leading international technological university. I'm head of conferencing and events at the university, and primarily we sell and operate the dedicated conferencing space within our Technology and Innovation Centre, which is one of the cities in central Scotland's kind of key medium-sized venues for business events of all kinds. We work really closely with our academic colleagues and with the Convention Bureau here in Glasgow to attract association business to the city. But we're a venue in our own right. We do a lot of internal events, we do a lot of corporate events as well, and we also look after all of the university's corporate events. So after COP26, we go straight into our first face-to-face graduations for 2 years. So I'm very much looking forward to
the day job,
the end of November. So that's us in a nutshell.
And we know that the pandemic's accelerated a lot of trends that were already happening and a lot of learnings. You said backstage, you've learned a lot in the last few weeks of organising.
Yeah, I would say so. So, because of the challenges that the challenges around COP26 and the pandemic and coming out of the pandemic, indoor events have really only been allowed for a few months. So understanding what it is that's possible and not possible, and trying to help people guess what they might be able to do, dealing with supply chain issues at the moment as well, dealing with the fact that, we weren't sure whether public transport was going to be operating as normal. We're not sure what kind of disruption is going to be caused to the city. Audiovisual suppliers across the whole of the UK are like, you can't have a plasma screen or a tech for love nor money. So adjusting our expectations and working with clients, who especially at the last kick, you're having to say to them, yes, I can give you a room. This is what I can give you with the room. So understanding what we can operate with, and actually understanding timescales as well, and if you work in events, you work in it because you're reasonably comfortable with going by the seat of your pants, but really now it's more by the seat of your pants than ever. And now, where someone's talking about something that's happening next week, you're like, we could build a building between now and next week. So I think understanding again, and that's been really important after 2 years of sitting in your box room saying, I'm not sure, or telling people they can't have things, understanding what it is that we're capable of and understanding how people can pull together to develop that, I think is a really positive thing.
Great. And Amanda, EICC, you've had a few big events in already, but as Gordon said, it's really only been since August. Yeah. So we've only got two months experience under your TED Countdown a couple of weeks ago. Yeah. But how are things at the EICC? What's your role there?
That's my role. Well, I guess my role, I feel a bit inadequate. I know I feel a bit inadequate now listening to your role. No, my role is I head up our sales and marketing team. So our company's vision is to create an environment which inspires ideas that change the world. So I think what I'm there to do is to make sure that we have that environment and we can bring people to the conference centre, to Edinburgh, to Scotland, where they create ideas that change the world. So actually, I'm going to say I'm a facilitator of bringing brilliant minds together. I think that's what we do. And yes, there's a sales job, there's a logistics, there's all the bits that go with it, but that's the fundamental part of my role.
No, I 100% agree. From our panellists earlier today, John and Mickael, it is bringing great minds together to have a discussion. And as we said, COP26 is the ultimate embodiment of that, if they get to some kind of something within a fortnight. I feel I know a lot more about COP26 than I even knew on Friday, frankly. I don't know if you feel the same. I've been inspired. I find myself agreeing with pretty much anyone who says anything from the main session yesterday. Do you feel the same? Do you think, gosh, you thought you knew what was coming, but this is slightly different?
It's, do you know what? I feel ahead of it, and clearly that's not because I've been in any secret discussions with government about what they're going to talk about. Actually, since we opened, I would say fully as a venue doing this business events, it's probably September, and every single conference has embedded part of their messaging in COP. So you mentioned TED Countdown Summit. Countdown deliberately wanted to bring thought leaders together in Scotland ahead of COP in Scotland. But even the Law Society, who had an event with us last week, huge part of the theme is around how can law influence climate change, what responsibilities do they have? So I think it's been changing the narrative here for a long time in that build-up, but the reality is it's now. So I've been watching it, and now, as you say, seeing it happen, I think this energy is going to stay with us for a considerable amount of time.
Gordon, you feel differently since Friday?
I feel tired since Friday. I think so. Living and working in the city, I think certainly for the last little while, because I work in business events, I've been aware that it's coming in a way that if you just live in the city, you might not have until the roads started to close. You kind of see it as this monolithic thing, and I think, as you were saying, even since yesterday, understanding that the world leaders bit happens now, but then it goes on for 2 weeks, and then the NGOs really get involved next week. So I didn't understand necessarily that it was all of those things. And I guess as well, so we hosted the Conference of Youth on the campus between Thursday and Sunday, which is one of it's the UN's youth constituency meeting, and some of those young people will go on to COP26 as well. It's just understanding what goes into it and how they express themselves, and talking to our own academics and understanding that it's tempting to see that it's all about wind turbines and photovoltaic panels and all that kind of stuff, and it's not. It's about how it impacts on people's lives, and yes, it is about how it affects people's lives in low-lying islands in the Pacific, but it's also about how does it affect people's lives here, because unless we find a solution, it becomes very expensive, so services have to be cut, and then the people with least in society become more disadvantaged. So it's understanding that climate change is not just about climate change, it's about societal change, and I'm able to understand more about what a just transition means than I was even a week ago.
No, certainly, and I think that it's the underwater islands, or the Indian Ocean islands. I think it was TED Summit, which you hosted, Amanda, and they did a video of a business event underwater, complete with aqualungs and plenary session, just to show that the sheer gravity of what they look at. These islands simply will not exist if nothing is done. I was going to come to it later, but whilst we're talking about client behaviour and discussions that you're both having with client behaviour, I wanted to ask how COP26 had influenced it, and it seems that it has been, but also the past 20 months. What Rory mentioned earlier with CSR, and it's something that people have had for years, decades almost. Do you think COP26 is very much a way to reboot CSR, or is there an element of, there's remnants of CSR in companies' charters and stuff because it needs to be there? Do you think there's a step change? Amanda, I'll go to you first.
I would say yes. I mean, even sort of EDI policies, etc. Previously perhaps we'd have been asked to say we had them, but nobody would have asked to see them. And it's part of the due diligence prior to an event has changed. I think our confidence in really pushing people to do more when they're thinking about the supply chain that's coming in. What are your menus? And I'm not saying you necessarily need to be completely plant-based, for example, or it needs to be 100% locally sourced, but have you actually thought about that to a detail and how much will be? And when we're asking those questions back now, the engagement is different. I think a lot of people used to sort of nod with the idea of doing a 100% plant-based menu for a conference and be like, yeah, our delegates won't like that. Yes. But actually they're now interested in having those types of conversation, or how can we leave more positive impacts in the community, and that sort of community wealth building piece. We're really seeing that from people in a genuine way, rather than, and not for a minute to suggest it was tick box, but I think sometimes some of those answers were around sustainability and around policy and around how you put together an event. Now, actually, it feels like it's living and breathing from planning to when people leave, and hopefully when they leave positive impacts in our destinations.
Right. I think people are more, clients are, again, they've always been concerned, but more concerned now about providing an environment that is safe for the people who are going to come there. So they are obviously very concerned about people's health and well-being in terms of COVID, and asking more questions about what they're doing and why they're doing it. I think it's much easier to suggest now to people that you have menus that are 100% vegan, vegetarian, because it sends out a positive message, and actually it makes their life easier because a whole lot of other dietary requirements are looked after right there. People are more concerned about food waste. We're more likely to ask people questions. So if they say they're doing this, we're more likely to say, well, why are you doing that? Like, why are you ordering that stuff? What do you need that for? Are you sure that's what you need? I think people are looking for a sense of certainty from venues and from other suppliers as well, from audiovisual suppliers as well. And unfortunately, I think a lot of the time we still can't provide it, because you're like, I'm working with the same information that you are. So I can tell you what I think, and I can tell you now what people before you have done, but I can't really give you certainty. I can tell you what we can do for you, and I can tell you if this contingency happens, how we would help you. But yeah, people are looking for certainty, and they're looking for support, I guess, in ways that they maybe weren't before. So there's more of a sense, especially, well, actually, regardless of the size of the event, that it's more of a collaborative undertaking, and that we are working together to deliver a really good, safe delegate experience that means that the people who are attending will be in the right place to receive the messages that they want to give them.
I think there's just more questions back and forth as well, other than the engagement of wanting to do the right thing. And certainly Amanda and I have had this conversation a lot over the last 18 months is, my client says, can we do this? And the answer is, well, I'll give you my interpretation of what you can do, but please don't take that as legal advice or authority to do so. I think that's a learning for governments around the world, is some kind of go-to for what can we do, because the interpretation has been quite a fun part of the last 18 months, hasn't it, Amanda? Yes. I spend a lot of time currently answering questions around certification.